Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Daily Dose of Tech. My name is Nishko, and this is the place where we come and study for 1 hour straight without any preparation, just going with the flow. Uh, as you might be knowing, that yesterday we started Azure Bicep, and in today's class, I'll say today's episode will be covering about the following up. You know. I'll first go with the revision, what we actually studied yesterday, and then what we'll do, we'll continue the, uh, I'll show you how to deploy the resources using Azure Biceps. But before starting, it's already gonna be about 1 minute since I started recording this video. As you know the format, I'm gonna open the clock and set a kind of uh, timer for next 59 minutes, which is exactly gonna be 1 minute, 1 hour for us to be together to study around this topic. So the clock has started, and we'll be now going to start with the by revising the things that we come up and discussed yesterday. Okay, before starting, if you guys are interested to following my topics and to following what are the things I am trying and coming up with for preparing, you can follow me on any of these platforms. Obviously, you are working, you are showing seeing this video on YouTube, so you can definitely subscribe to my channel, and you can follow me on Instagram, you can follow me on LinkedIn as well, you can follow me on X as well, you can follow me on GitHub as well. I would love to be followed on GitHub, so all of my projects and notes and this whole slide is gonna be present on GitHub as well, with all the links provided below. If you want to join the tech community which I am building along this YouTube channel, the biggest tech community of the IT people who are crazy about building things, you're crazy about AWS, Azure, and cloud infrastructure, or building any application, mobile development. I'm building the biggest tech community of India. So you can definitely join my channel. I'll just show you how it looks like. So without wasting a time, this is my channel, how it looks like. We have a lot of people joining soon, and we are working all together and just doing crazy stuff. Um, before Okay, without wasting your time, let's just start. It's already been 57. I have already taken 3 minutes, but now I would just like to quickly go what we did yesterday. So I explained you what is Bicep. It's a simple deploying language, not a crazy as a C++, normal language which we use to deploy infrastructure, and this is specifically for Azure. It has some benefits which are as following, for which are as following. Where is that slide? Okay, it comes to the third slide, but before that, basically I explained in this slide that what are the different ways we can deploy to Azure, and we have Azure portal. By the portal we can do things. We have Azure CLI, we have PowerShell, we have Bicep, and we have Terraform. So the bottom two are kind of deploying thing as an infrastructure as a code. So uh, moving to the next slide, what are the benefits of using Bicep? As explained earlier, it is the simplest syntax. Whatever you do, it always provides the same result. Same file is gonna provide the same result. But there's a catch. I'll explain to you when it's gonna provide the same result, and when it may change in situations where your environment is kind of upgraded or kind of drifted from the original state of the Bicep, which is obviously uh, you know kind of with every infrastructure as a code present. Uh, so that we'll discuss in detail in the later part of the video. Then, before deploying your actual resource and getting billed for those resources, you can see how your deployed resources is gonna look like. You can preview the basically changes before it actually starts working for you. You can deploy multiple things at one. You can maintain the logic and modularity of the this whole your infrastructure configuration. You can store it, you can reference it from some another file. It's super flexible. And the very best benefit, I don't know what's very best is like, but the best benefit is that it has no cost for you to getting start and deploy things on the Azure, because it is officially maintained by Azure itself, so there is no cost of maintaining the Bicep. On the other hand, where is Terraform uh, for enterprise deployments? These are a costly products and a kind of charge. So usually a lot of companies who are using and are deploying this stuff on the Microsoft Azure, they prefer to use and go with the Bicep first. Okay, so moving to the next topic. Moving to the next topic. Okay, this is one of the thing which I realized that I need to put, and it is kind of what it is kind of how we kind of doing the same thing for which this playlist we started, right? This playlist is to go unprepared, start explaining things, and in the in the next day, on the next day, come up and revise your content and just upgrade it. So while I was explaining about how to deploy things on Azure, I came across that to understand the Bicep, it is very important to touch this specific concept, which is about the different deployment scope or the different scope where resources are organized in Azure. So in Azure, it is very important for obviously we'll cover in some later videos as well in future in detail. But what I want to tell you in from this slide is that there are four layers, you can say, where a resource can be deployed. It will be the same resource, but actually you can deploy at four different layers, and these layers are called tenant, management group, subscription, and a resource group. For though, if any of you are familiar with any of these things, it's kind of like a level or hierarchy where you can kind of, it is basically designed to organize your resources. So ultimately all the resources are gonna um, you know uh, sit in the resource group level, but you can deploy that specific resource in a resource group on the tenant level itself. So you can go on the higher level, you can go on the management layer and deploy something specific to a resource group in a region. uh, what I am trying to explain is that there are four layers, and we have to specify in which layer we would like to deploy the resource through Bicep. And this is not just with Bicep, this is also common with any deployment that we are doing. In some way, we have to provide where our deployment should go in which layer. And when we say that a deployment is targeting a layer, it means that it's gonna stored its metadata. This is very important. I'll just change my pen. That there is a thing called metadata. There are some information besides your actual infrastructure resource details. There are some informations that you need, that Azure needs to kind of keep within itself, and it maintains that data and state, so that it basically maintains that specific information and keep it at, I don't know what they use it for, but definitely there are two types of information that Azure keeps kind of a record. One is the metadata, so this could be in a different location or a different resource group, and there is the actual uh, resource that you are deploying, the details about that I will show in the later videos, obviously in the upcoming videos maybe, that how and where you can differentiate these things, and why your deployment pipeline or your deployment logic should be written in a way that it is very systematically visible that which deployment you did and where it resided. So all those things I'm going to explain it to you. But the very important thing that you have to keep here in mind is that not all resources are deployable to all these four specific scopes. For example, there are a lot of category of resources which are only deployed to subscription and cannot be deployed to resource group. And the example is that for example, if you want to deploy a resource group itself, which is one of the type of resources, although it's a scope as well, a resource group, it's a scope where you organize all of your resources, but you also deploy resource group, and you can do it by Bicep as well, but you cannot deploy a resource group within a resource group. So there comes the limitation and the fact that not all resources are deployable to the resources. So For example, policies, I guess you cannot deploy at the resource group level. Policies are always deployed on the subscription minimum, scope that needs policy to be deployed as subscription. And similarly, there are a lot of different things. I may come up with those kind of list where you can deploy things on which scope, but take it as an exception. There are not all resources are deployed to the all the four scopes. Obviously in the top scope everything you can deploy, but not everything can be deployed to resource group. So keeping this in mind, let's move forward. And just here is a visual representation that this is the icon that looks for tenant, and this is how the management group looks, and this is how the subscription looks, and this is the resource group. I have pasted these icons here so that it would be easier, and you guys can always remember the how it reflects the icon. So basically you are building your dictionary along with it. Like when you are talking about and explaining something about Azure, these are the very keywords that we always use. uh, Anyhow, let's move to the next slide, which is about the Azure resource provider and types. This is kind of the, how can I say, is is kind of is a way where is a way how resources are organized in the Azure. So basically, uh, let's create that there is someone between. Let's imagine a situation. There is someone between me, who is a kind of a client, and there is someone. I'll just put my face here in front so that I can just talk to you here like straight. So there is, um, let's say, a middleman, not a middleman. Like when we requesting something to Azure, let's say all the request goes to one single place, and that single place decides where to send further that request to get created your resources. That that central place in the Azure is called Azure Resource Manager. It's called ARM. So if I open it here, that's a very important thing, ARM. And what ARM does is that it takes care of sending the request to the specific type of service provider, we say. So basically this thing, whatever I'm writing it here, the service provider. So ARM directs your request, whatever we are deploying, either via Bicep or via CLI or via PowerShell, whatever we are doing, ARM send that request to that specific resource provider, and the resource provider validates all our properties and everything, and based on the input present and passed to the provider, it creates the resource. For example, some of the resource providers names in the Azure are, for example, Azure Compute, Azure Storage, Security, Network, uh, Vaults. I guess that is also one. So basically, these are resource providers. Um, it's not official, but you can consider that these resource provider itself are kind of a specialized team who is specialized to kind of maintain the versioning and the deployment of specific type of resources. So if I take an example, there is a compute provider. So Microsoft Azure.compute, it's a provider, and that provider is responsible for is responsible for creating virtual machines, virtual machine images, virtual machine disk, VM scale set. All these are kind of, there are many more types as well, but all these are kind of responsibility of the Azure compute provider, and that compute provider have their own way of properties that are kind of needed for them to configure uh, a resource under the Azure compute. So I'll show you a reference, and yeah, let me show it to you right now. So this specific documentation, I will provide this documentation in the chat as in the let's say comment or description. You can find it always, but you can also search resource provider for Azure services. So these are the resource providers which have a different you know resources. And so basically there is a compute resource, what I was explaining, there is a compute resource provider, and that compute resource provider is having a lot of services that they are kind of responsible for, when someone requests, they are responsible for it to create. So I just show you that there is a Azure virtual machine. So there's a virtual machine image, then there should be a virtual machine itself as well. I guess it's a classic compute, that's what they're saying, or Microsoft Compute. Yeah, so it's containing this virtual machine. And there's the app platform, AVS, Bash. I don't know. I haven't used a lot of services, but these are one of the thing. Let me. Okay, let me pause this. No, I don't want to pause. I'm getting a call. Mm, I'm getting a call as well, but wait. I'll. Okay, let me. I have to pause this time. Kind of an unplanned call, but I'll be back. Okay. So I'm back, and hopefully the recording is started. I am gonna resume my session. Let's go back. So yeah, basically what I was explaining, I was on this uh, documentation. This is the very most, not say most popular, but it's a good resource where you can get a list of all the resource provider. And the reason for you to get familiar with resource provider is that because at the end when you are using Bicep, you will find it easier to go and you know to go and use the right Bicep resource provider that you want to use to deploy an actual resource. So basically sometimes it get very difficult to find which Bicep resource you are kind of you need to deploy a resource. I'll give you a quick example. For example, there is a very popular service called Azure Service Bus, but the Service Bus resource provider is having a different name. So that comes under the service but namespace. So it you have to go and for example, if I search namespace, AI machine learning. So in the container core resources, namespace. Um, okay, Azure service bus. But if you go to the Bicep, it's somehow gonna mention that it's coming from the, for example, I'll show you Azure service bus official Bicep template. If you're gonna search this, it comes with namespace. So basically you have to be aware about the namespace providers and the types and what are the different types of services being provided by that resource. So if I just create go here, so this namespace, under this namespace there are a different type of how can I say objects are present for you to create this using the Bicep. We'll come to this again later in the video, but what I was trying to just explain that there is a concept of resource provider, and resource provider is nothing but kind of a category of resources that are maintained by I think in a certain manner with something similar properties, and that we usually use to reference whenever we are starting our starting our uh, Bicep file, when we are starting our logic on the Bicep. Okay, I already explained you how to install Bicep. We have to install the Azure CLI, which we already did in the last video, just the previous video. You also have once you install the Bicep, you also have to write command to you have to first install the CLI, which we did, and once you install the CLI, you have to write a command install Bicep, and it's going to install the Bicep for you. And then you can just search AZ Bicep version, and it's going to give you the version of the Bicep installed on your system. There is also VS Code snippet, VS Code tool, sorry, extension that you can use for getting more help from the bicep, like composing your bicep file. Now let's go to the okay, let's go to the VS Code. My bad, what I opened. Okay, let me cancel this. I don't know what this is doing. Okay, I first want to enable one setting to auto save things. File auto save, right? uh, this is a pretty new setup. I have a new VS Code, nothing crazy I have done here. I just only have installed Azure Bicep, and we started with creating our first file, which is Azure resource group.bicep. Now I copied this snippet uh, from one of the examples present on the Bicep official documentation, and this setup is quite, I'll say it's quite simple at this point of time, and it started with a target scope. What this is exactly what I explained in this slide. Target scope is basically the level or the layer at which our bicep is gonna start deploying things, and this is a very important instruction, I'll say, because your environment can be impacted. Let's say you have a production grade kind of Azure environment which you are maintaining from Bicep, and you wanted to deploy something. So the golden rule of thumb is that always use a least uh, kind of always use the least lower level of the target scope, which is this resource group. But if you cannot deploy any specific resource in that layer, then you can move up to one layer. So here, for this example's sake, I am deploying a resource group, and resource group cannot itself deploy inside a resource group, so we are deploying in a subscription. For people who are aware about this concept, this is kind of quite common for them, but what we are not doing anything crazy. It's just we are creating one of the type which is equivalent to the layer, but since we cannot contain this resource inside another same thing, we are creating that resource in the upper layer. I now here from 3rd to 9, the important instructions about your resource starts. The very first keyword is the resource keyword. By defining the resource, you actually state Bicep, okay, now you are going to write about a specific resource that you wanted to deploy or get created on the Microsoft Azure. This is the API, and you can get the reference of these from the official Bicep documentation, and I will show you how to always how you can be efficient at searching Bicep on the documentation, because when you are actively working on the Azure Bicep, you need to reference it a lot. Because when I was deploying things, and even now when I'm deploying things, I have to check or reference the Bicep always, because new API version comes, some syntax might get updated, we have to keep track of it. Anyhow, you start with writing the keyword resource group, and here comes this they say it, this is a symbolic name. Symbolic name is kind of a variable, you can say, which you are just giving for the resource that you are trying to deploy. And obviously after this is come the resource URL, and that resource URL is nothing but kind of organized in the by the resource provider / type. So there is a resource provider called Microsoft.resources, which is responsible for creating resource groups, and there is a version here available, and whatever the property configuration is gonna be, that property configuration is uh, is kind of a requirement by this resource provider. There are few default properties that is needed by all the resource provider, and that is the name, and which basically means the resource which you are trying to deploy. For example, a function app, an app service, whatever you are trying to deploy, what name you want to reflect it on the Azure portal. And obviously there is another good best practices present to put your name for the resources, So we'll follow that practices when we are deploying our thing as well, and how we can maintain that in a modular way. I'll show you the crazy way to do it as well. Then comes the deployment location. Now this property is a very important property, because that is the property which is gonna decide where your metadata is gonna be present. um no, my bad. So this property will decide that where your actual resource group is gonna live in which region. For example, um, as you all know that Azure, we we deploy the resources in different regions. This is one of the kind of how can I say, more on the planning side and business side thing, is that you have to select your region, which is kind of deciding or having the influence what sort of compliance can be put on that region, data security which you want to take care, so you have to specifically deploy. So basically you have to decide a region first before deploying it actually. So once you decide that region is kind of uh, is kind of we provide that information via this property, I'll say. So location, deployment dot location, it's gonna fetch the um, is gonna fetch the location where your resources are gonna get provided. But I'm gonna show it to you how this function basically is getting its location. And this is really important, because here nowhere we are mentioning about either it should deploy in Canada East, Canada Central, but how this will get its own this information. I'll show it to you in the upcoming part. Now comes the tags. Every resource in Azure, as we know, can be tagged. This is again an optional kind of property, but this property can be used to, how can I say, to make your working with Azure more efficient. And there is again a tagging strategy that we'll discuss in some future videos, but this is not important. You can ignore it, but yeah, you are good to put tag. And the important thing is that I would like to show you how you can also put tags, because as you are seeing, it has a certain way of writing, right? There's Can you create a tag with a space in between? For example, cost teams dash team space cost. How will you write it? I'll just show you a way, because a lot of teams just write it continuously or something like that, but I can show you how you can be more creative around the tag names. Beside this, it comes with a property. I'm not sure how that setting is now. I will be enabling it, but I'm just trying to see if any of the other property. So I do not know the shortcut to come up with that thing, but uh, there should be a proper. How can I see what are the properties available? Show bicep deployment plane, resource, restore, insert resource, generate parameter file, refactor format. No worries. But what will directly go to the official bicep documentation, and we will always gonna reference from there. So Azure resource group official bicep template. So here it is, and always put official bicep template. It's gonna give you the right information on Google. So yeah, it's here. And with the properties, this specific resource does not need any property, so it's kind of a very you know less asked information resource. So you can provide just the basic thing, and it will be able to deploy that for you. Will now directly gonna give that a shot. I'm gonna write it as my first resource group. Let's say we are deploying it in the production environment, we are giving the tag. Okay, now the very important thing is that you have defined your resources. At this point of time, you do not need the bicep parameter file. The bicep parameter file comes when you have a certain structure and you just need to provide different values so that based on the parameter it creates different resources, but you want to keep the logic of the bicep one time. So with working on the parameter will come later, but now what we'll do, we'll try to deploy this resource group bicep file using CLI. Now you must be thinking that this I am trying to explain you bicep, then how come CLI comes here? So I just want to take a moment to explain here it again, that bicep is kind of a configuration language. It stores your state, it stores the properties of your resources, right? So, but you can leverage these all maintenance and the properties by storing them in your version control system, whatever your company or someone is using. So you can store that there. So infrastructure, for example, you can store this in the GitHub, GitLab, whatever you are using, Jenkins or whatever you guys are using as a repository for your infrastructure as a code. And obviously we're going to touch that not in this but sometime later. But the actual deployment of this resource is gonna be using CLI or PowerShell. But what we are commanding here is that, hey CLI, deploy a resource in this specific location with this specific name using the configuration and properties stored in our bicep file. And there comes the importance of our bicep file. Usually all the property you can provide from the CLI as well, and that's what maybe in the beginning people were doing, but all the properties of all the resources can also be provided via the bicep, via the CLI. But it's not, how can I say, it's not efficient and a better experience for us to maintain the code. So without wasting a time, let's just try to deploy one resource today. We just left with 28 minutes. So what I'll do is that I'll just show you how you can, always, you don't need to remember all the CLI commands, but what we are gonna do is that I'll just show you how you can navigate. So since we are dealing with bicep, Azure starts with AZ bicep. So AZ bicep, always ask help, and by the time when you are comfortable, you're gonna remember it for sure. So after bicep there are different things, we are not interested at this point of time. That's more of a CLI properties for working with bicep. What we want is the bicep yeah, so these are, my bad, I just remember one thing. These are the properties that you can use to customize and the power of biceps, so all those things which, yeah. But for deployment there is a specific command, and these commands are based on the resources. So AZ, I'll just show you everything. AZ bicep, AZ help, when you're gonna do, so AZ help is gonna give you all the commands that is available for you when you are working with the bicep. Oh, I just remember that I should keep it a big, so I just wrote this. And here you can see that when you are working with Azure, it provides a lot of kind of different arguments that you can use to specify what specifically you want to do on your Azure environment. Our deployment comes from AZ deploy. So yeah, because we are deploying this on the subscription, we have here Azure where is the Azure subscription. So we should be having Azure subscription because we are deploying this at this subscription. So let's say I'll just search how to deploy Azure resource group on subscription CLI command. It's gonna give me the CLI command. So basically, I hope Azure CLI is here. So Azure deployment. Okay, so in the deployment, now I remember. We have here the deployment. So this specific command, Azure deployment help, this specifically takes all the deployment operations. Even though we have a bicep, that's more of, working with the bicep, for example, linting, formatting, generating a parameter file. Those, like when you need to specifically do something with the file, that's the easy bicep commands comes. But in the Azure CLI, once your bicep file is ready, all the activities are gonna be performed using AZ deployment. I'm just gonna write it help again so that we can together see what are the different arguments we need to provide here going forward. Now, as I was explaining earlier, the different scope, those all things are coming here as an necessary kind of information that you should need to be aware. Since I have already told you that there are layers of deployment, at this point of time it's very important for you to be specific where you want to deploy. And here it comes. So basically here groups, when they say Azure groups, so there is Azure groups, which is nothing but Azure resource group. Basically it's saying here as well. So groups command will deploy to Azure resource groups. MG gonna deploy to Azure management group. Sub operations is gonna deploy deployment operations. That's subscription. I have never used Azure operations, I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, sub is used for subscription, and tenant is used to deploy resources at the tenant loop, tenant scope, which is the very highest scope. In our case, we are deploying Azure resource group, and resource group cannot be deployed to a resource group, as as we know. So we will be deploying it on the Azure subscription. So I will start writing the Azure subscription. Oh, my bad. Let me scope it down. So what I'll do, AZ deployment group. Now I'll write help again. Why I'm writing help is that because I'm just trying to explain you guys how you can always navigate the command. It is, insanely impossible, for the general audience. I know some of you might be crazy who remembers all the command, but it's a waste of time if you are someone who is struggling with and still think that you need to have basic deployment commands need to be ready. But don't by the time you will eventually get to know about these things if you're actively working on it. But it's not wise to spend time on remembering command. If you don't know, just search it right away. How to search it? Using the group. So for example, I write something wrong in the spelling. AZ deployment group, I will write help again, and here it's giving me all the commands that I can use to deploy. And again, example, if you haven't noticed, I just did a mistake. I should be using subscription here, but I typed the group, and eventually if I try it, this is gonna fail my deployment for sure, because a resource group cannot deploy to a resource group. So it's gonna fail, which I'll show you soon. But I'll just correct this and I'll put subscription over here. But before doing that, I want to show you all that these basically commands are gonna be common in all the deployment layers. So you can perform the list of actions that you are seeing here. You can perform that action either with the group, either with the subscription, or everything. I think there would be a slight differences. Obviously it's different scope, but generally you can delete resources, you can create resources, you can export resources, list, show, validate, what if, wait, a lot of things you can do. And because here at different scope all these things are available, it's very important for you to be very specific about your resource. And if you are experimenting with things on your own specific environment, it's fine. But in an enterprise environment, you must be at the very specific low resource group, I'll say scope, and deploy your stuff there. Okay, now What I'm gonna do, I'll just clear this thing, and I'll write it again. Az deployment sub, which represents the subscription, and help to just see what are the commands available for me. And if I remember from the previous example, it's pretty much everything same here. uh, it's pretty much everything same here that were in the group. So basically actions are same, it just the scope gets changes, and we have to be specific about the scopes where we are deploying things. Now we'll go one step down further in this, and we'll see what are the easy deployment, what are the further commands that what are the further information is needed for us to deploy a resource group. So obviously we are creating, so we're going to use the create command, az deployment subscription, create help, and it's going to show me what are the things that I need to provide. And from here I'll be starting. Oh my god, I spelled it again wrong. Az deployment sub create help. Perfect. Now as you can see here, this is a very big list. This is a very big list, and it's gonna get boring, but the one thing that I would like to show you is that all which is absolutely needed for us to deploy, they are kind of mentioned here as required. They are kind of mentioned, oh my god, seriously, they are kind of mentioned here as required. So easy deployment sub create, you wrote until this, then you have to provide at least the location where you want to deploy your Azure resource. Even the deployment name is something which is optional. This is deployment name, and I'll show you how you can take this as your advantage if you are writing your deployment file name as well. But that's for a different strategy. But all the rest of the informations are not needed. All you need is just a location, because in Azure, providing location and the scope where we are deploying is a very must thing. That's how the Azure is organized. So always think of a solution based on location, where it's available, how much is the cost in that location, all those things, because different country have different policies around different tools and technology. Europe is relatively a lot strict around these things, right? So always think of that solution. What I'm gonna do, I'll write it one more time, because az deployment sub create help, and I forgot to show you one thing, that there is an option to provide the file, which file you want to use to deploy your resources in the subscription. So, and that was template file, the path to the template file or bicep file that is needed for you to provide your kind of all the bicep file that you're trying to deploy. And then there is a template URI, which is not, I'll show you, and it's not important as well. But since this is a part of the, how can I say, CLI mode, I don't want to go into that. But here you see there is a parameter, and what I explained, that whatever properties you want to provide, you can provide just directly in the command line, but there is a certain pattern, right? Then it has to be a key value, right? But this parameter can also be used, I guess. A parameter may be supplied from a file, which the bicep param file. So we can use the bicep param file to provide the parameter for it as well. What I'm gonna do, I'll just use this information, and I'll be providing the bicep file which I have. So I'll do ls minus a, and I have my bicep file here. I'll start writing easy deployment subscription create with a file with f name, and I press tab, and it's automatically selected the resource group of the file. And there are few commands that I write usually when working on from the CLI to deploy bicep. But as you remember, there's one required command, and that is location. So you have to provide the location, and because at the moment I'm in Canada, I'm gonna put the Canada East. let's say I can place any resource region as well. I'm gonna put this. One thing which I always use, and I'll take you back to the slides, is the benefit, and I would like to show you here is that we discussed that we can do the preview changes. And right from the starting, I would like to show you how to leverage this thing. To preview your changes, what does it mean? That before actually your resource get deployed, you can see what are the things it's going to modify in my environment, right? And that you can do is using a command called what. That so that look at the keyboard strokes down below on the screen. It's double dash what if. I don't know why my keys are not showing what I'm typing, but I'll check. What if it's here? Now, this is ready to get deployed, but till now I have not showed you how I logged in or how the login is gonna work. So that is a really important step for you to first get authenticated, then you are able to allowed. And right now it's gonna give you a complaint message that you are not authenticated, or it may directly prompt you to or it may directly prompt you to kind of authenticate yourself. So I'm just gonna press enter and let's see what happens. See, it's quite boring because you are not seeing any uh, logs over here. So before, and as you know, as I told you that it's showing me as your login is not done. Before we go, there is one more flag that I always use, which is, I guess, dash. I think it's dash dash debug. Let's see, or single dash debug, but I use it always to just see if how it's doing. So basically behind the scene it making a lot of HTTP calls, and it's making sure that I am authenticated. So with the debug I will kind of get all these things, and it's pretty much shows what exactly happened. Obviously what you got showed without using debug as a single line, you are still getting that here. But during a long deployments, you if it's something that you would like to see what's happening and you want to track your deployment, I it's my personal choice, I always use debug. So now it comes to do the login. 13 minutes left. I'm just gonna try how in the very fresh environment it's gonna show me the Azure login, how it's working. So I'm gonna press Azure login and I can obviously do debug to see how it's working. So it give me Azure login. Okay, so now it's showing that allow Python to find devices on local network. So just to give you a context, the Azure CLI is written in Python. So even the errors and messages, what you're gonna see, mostly you will see a Python syntax in the error. If I take you back here just a few, you will see that init.py, internal exception that this guy is not is login and try to deploy things without being login, right? So I'm doing it for the first time. It's asking me for some permission to access the network. So I just said allow, and it redirected me. I'm gonna choose whatever account that I would like to continue on. So basically, let's say I used at this point of time this, and I logged in, and as an Azure guy, I have been authenticated, so I have to provide my authenticator. So I'll be quick on that. Okay, I have. This should be a quick one, but give me a second. Okay, I hope it worked in first time because I have a lot of authentications. Oh, it didn't work as expected. So this didn't work. Okay, let me try one more thing. Perfect. So now I am logged in. Logged in means now from the CLI I should be able to deploy to my Azure environment. It was a step needed for you to first authenticate it, obviously, because the CLI, your local environment, is not knowing where to actually deploy things. So now I'll go back and it gave me the subscription. So I have just a basic subscription as of now, which is called Nishko, but a subscription can be a lot in a specific environment and you may see a lot of things. But what's important is that you have to select in which subscription you want to deploy this thing, right? So you, because we are deploying on subscription, so we choose the subscription, and I'm gonna press one by default. I even though I have just one, select a subscription and a tenant. So I just have one, so let me just select one at this point of time, and I'll just verify whether I'm logged in or not. So AZ account, what is gonna show? There is a command called AZ account show that will show whether I am logged in or not, and it's gonna give me that which subscription I am currently in. So it's showing tenant display name and that. Oh, no. So that's my login credential is coming up, right? Um, AZ account list is another useful information that shows what are the subscription uh, is present, and I'm not sure. Okay, so I guess obviously I do not log like the JSON format, so there is a AZ help command. Probably we will be not able to deploy today, but what I'm gonna do, AZ account help, I want to just format it so that it's easier for us to see. I guess it's this table. Oh, perfect. Let's see if there is a config property present or not. Okay. So yeah, this is the property. Again, I'm getting a bit off the track, but it's really important for you to be productive when you are working on it. And looking for the JSON is the difficult thing. And when things are on the in the table, it it gives you more information, right? So AZ config is a property where you can set this permanently. So all the responses and all the commands and queries that you're gonna use it in future, it's always gonna be in the table format. So AZ config set, let me check what I can set here. So I can set core.collect telemetry. So these are the following things that is already set, and disable color with no color. AZ, I don't know, AZ config set uh, core dot mm, core color with core disable color with core dot no color. So core dot no color, I'm not sure, I never use this property, but looks like I won't be able to deploy in the next 7 minutes. So let's just play around, and I'll set this property false, and it just updated that. uh, okay, and I'll just, so hide warning and only show errors is this. Hide warning and only show errors with, no, I want to be aware about the warnings. So it's always better to be aware about the warnings. I do not mind at all. Instead of getting charged on the resources, I better get warned for any of the things that I'm doing in a not good way. So only show errors false, no, only, I don't know how this is following. Only show errors, I said that's false. And okay, there are some more things, which is output format. Yeah, this was the uh, primary setting that I was looking for. Az config set output equals to table. The following arguments are required. What is the table? Output, did I did anything? Az config set. Is it like this? Az config set output table. Mm, oh, I did mistake. Let me just correct this. AZ config output that table. No, it's not coming up. AZ config set output equals to table. What's wrong? What's wrong? No worries. Let's ask ChatGPT. I don't know where it's taking me for the co-pilot. Bro, I have 5 minutes left. Let me set this up for you. Don't ask me this crazy question. Okay, yeah, I know how much Microsoft you. Okay, so it has to be in this way. Let me just put it and run it. Perfect. Now if I do AZ account show, it's printing me in the table format. So as you can see, I'm just reducing the font size. It would be difficult for you to see it, but this gives a lot of more information than the JSONs that we were dealing with earlier. And now by default, all your responses are going to be in the JSONs. But again, this is something which is good to have and kind of make you more productive. Um okay, now I'm left with 4 minutes. I just want to recap everything that we went through. So I started with by explaining uh, how to what are the resource types and resource providers. Uh, so I mean, let me just clear this thing. So we started with we studied kind of resource provider, and then I explained resource provider and then resource types, and I provided you the official documentation as well. I'm gonna put that in the comment, official documentation. Then I showed you how to log in Azure CLI. Oops, I don't know what. Azure CLI login that we just did. Then we set Azure CLI some properties, which was not required, but it's good to have. Let's say output format. The reason I did this because for all the bicep, eventually you have to come at the end and use CLI to deploy it. So it's very important that the error messages, the information, the any special, it's not special, any special indication, whatever you want to see, should be visible in a more organized way, right? Because we are kind of always in a bit hurry. So considering that in mind, with my past experiences, this is nice to have. The two important things that I always use and I advise to use as well, even if you are a pro deployment and knows things well as well, use the what if command and the debug command to not get bored. So these two command, so what if kind of is used again for preview changes, and debug is kind of used for seeing all the logs or background logs, you can say, right? Let me just check how much we have. Okay, it's almost 58 minutes. I guess, where is my terminal? I guess we have covered a lot and kind of saw things from a different angle. In tomorrow's, let me come to center. I'm always looking at the side. So in tomorrow's video, what I'm gonna do is probably will be at the right spot where we will be deploying the resource in the Azure inside our environment basically. So from tomorrow, it's gonna be a crazy thing. I'll take more examples of Azure, different Azure resources that we can deploy, because I want to show you different ways of kind of different properties that comes with different resource providers. So you will get an idea where from where your you will get an overall experience about how things works around different environments. uh, yeah, having said that, I would just like to say, if you find this interesting, if you find this engaging, please do subscribe to my channel. You can join any of the platform, you can follow me any of the platform, you can ask me anywhere any question, you can suggest me which topic you want to see in futures to be discussed in this way. Obviously, the main purpose of this is to come up directly and just try it out different things for 1 hour and prepare a video around it, so that at the end we can just let me just stop this. Okay, yeah, so at the end, we can just come up with some good information, and we create a dedicated playlist for that. Having said that, all the information and all the notes that we are organizing in this series for this specific topic, you can find it in my Notion site that I'm gonna paste and provide in the description. So yeah, without any wasting time, let's meet tomorrow. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I'm gonna stop.